in the States, over the course of maybe 25 years, I think after the beginning of the end of the Iraqi war, police departments really got a lot of ex-military gear, MRAPs, automatic rifles. I mean, even Canada went through a militarization of their police force where they would actively advertise it on their websites. They would have battle-hardened vehicles now painted in black, and they would proudly display this. I mean, do you think that it is bad or good that the American police force went through such a huge transformation from being the police officer down the street who's supposed to protect you to the potential local army who's armed to the teeth, who may aggressively sort of, and use terms to be YouTube compliant, dispose of you if they wish?
Right. So enforcement tactics changed and evolved over time to meet the threat at that particular time. So right after the Iraqi war, we'd had gone through 9/11, so there was all of this anti-terrorism, a lot of anti-terrorism training. There was a lot of money allocated to intelligence gathering. So this is something that most people don't understand about police work, is that yes, you saw the brand new blacked out SWAT vehicles, special weapons and tactics, these special teams that get all armied up and go knock down doors. But what most people don't realize is the millions and hundreds of millions of dollars that were allocated from the federal government to state and local governments for intel analysis and intel gathering. The U.S. became much more of a police state because of the Patriot Act, which is the most unpatriotic act on the books.
Well, it's interesting that they called it the Patriot Act. It was 1984, like it's as if it was taken right from the pages of 1984.
Absolutely. The Patriot Act, which is still in force. You now have the TSA Nazis, if I could say that, at the airports, checking your shoes
and they're not even the police. They're not even the police, and they've done some very, very suspicious things at the airports.
There's a lot of corruption there.
Yeah, the TSA is very, very. It's an interesting sort of government body. That was when was it? Post 9/11.
It was post 9/11. Yeah, Patriot Act was passed, I think, probably within 6 months, because it was already prepared. Well, we can leave that for another conversation, but. Yeah, pretty much the language in the Patriot Act was already prepared. So 9/11 was just a perfect, opportunity.
They were like waiting for something to happen.
And it's like, here you go, right? Coincidentally. So there's a lot of intelligence gathering that people just don't realize. And everybody sees, the shiny new vehicles and all the SWAT gear and tactics and things like that. Now, I can speak for my area in Texas specifically because that's what I have firsthand knowledge of. I don't know how New York City or Chicago or LA spent their money and what they did in their particular area because I don't know the types of threats that they respond to in that area. But along the river, we saw an escalation of violence from Mexico and the narcotics traffickers, the human traffickers against not only civilians, but also law enforcement. So this required a rearming, so to speak, to counter that particular threat. There was new vehicles purchased, off-road vehicles to go into heavily forested and bushy areas along the river. Uniforms were changed to go from the nylon, and polyester to, more combat type BDUs, so you could survive out in this particular environment. So, like I said, the tactics changed because of the threats that law enforcement was encountering.
So does this mean that it got significantly more dangerous for the local population to live in the U.S.? Is that why? Like, is that the true reason why these police departments bought up and militarized themselves, or perhaps was it the other way around?
A lot of it was grants. A lot of it was, you could, in hindsight, you could call it a commercial operation. Okay, so the federal government would give a grant to a small department, say $250,000. You can spend it on vehicles, equipment, tactics. By the way, you can order from this catalog with preferred vendors that have already been vetted and already been, choose which vendor you want to spend this money on. So in many ways, it's one big circle jerk.
Well, hold on a second.
I'm going off topic.
No, this is not off topic. So what you're saying is that the federal government prints money, then gives this money as a grant to the police forces, right. and then they give this little booklet saying, "Hey, by the way, we have all of these manufacturers who make this equipment, right. who are reselling this old equipment that was already used,
and we have preferred pricing from these vendors, which would be cheaper. So in other words, you can get more for your money buying from this catalog than if you were to go through your ordinary procurement channels."
And I assume that you'd have to spend the grant in total, otherwise you'd either get less or none of it next year.
Absolutely, it has to be accounted for. So, but if you order from this catalog, don't worry, we got you covered.
But so? It boggles my mind that this is not corruption, because what you're saying is that taxpayer money is used, or if they're printing the money, then it's still through inflation, they're still punishing the taxpayer, to give jobs basically to the industries who manufacture arms in the States and do it legally through grants, which is funneling money through police departments.
How is this any different from manufacturing a war in some other country to then fund a jobs program in your home state with your military manufacturer or your defense manufacturer?
So the money just goes around. It goes to a comedian, but then actually it ends up back in the U.S. if it's not stolen by the comedian's friends.
And of course, there's going to be some incentive for the senators and the representatives to vote for that as well. So in the form of lobbying and trips and things like this, which is just, it's organized corruption, it's legalized corruption in the United States. That's what lobbying is.
So it's technically then, by definition, not corruption. I mean, I'm talking about how somebody defending it would be. And again, I'm seeing this as from the view of a person who's lived there and who's lived here, and as a person who's tired of hearing the myths about both places. And in this case, I mean, it is corruption through the eyes of a Russian, I guess, because if this happens in Russia, everyone's going nuts about it, saying, no, you have to arrest this person. And we've had lots of problems, and then at the same time, recently, there's been a lot of arrests in the past 5-6 years of people being taken down for these things.
Sure.
As they say, everyone has a file with their name on it, and then it's pulled out at the right time, right? But in the U.S., that's not corruption. That's perfectly legal, and that's just a way of doing business.
It's just a way of doing business. Absolutely. So the corruption, like I said, is much more veiled, much more nuanced. Now, you do have open, blatant corruption as well. So I'll give you an example. And I'm going to use Texas Department of Public Safety. This was, I can't remember what year, I believe this was late 90s. And there was a trooper that, I'll tell you the story the way it happened. So DPS made an arrest of a drug courier. And the drug courier wanted to make a deal. And he says, hey, you got me, but I can give you a bigger fish. and this fish wears a badge, and he wears your badge. Are you interested? So, yeah. So, brought in the prosecutor, they make a deal. He gives up information, and he says, you've got a bad guy. And what this trooper does is he specifically targets vehicles with Mexican license plates. So vehicles that travel from Mexico into the United States, they can travel so many miles into the United States, and he will look for violations and pull them over. So under Texas law at that time, and I think it's still on the books now, if you're from a foreign country and you're driving in Texas and you commit a traffic violation, I have to physically take you to the judge right then and there, instanter, which means instantly. Now, however, if you choose to pay the fine that the judge would impose for this particular crime, we can go down to a supermarket or a bank, you get a money order, fill it in to the judge, I take that, I give you a receipt, sayonara, go on your way. Okay? What this trooper was doing is he was targeting Mexican nationals for fictitious BS, pulling them over, and of course they're in a foreign country, they're scared, and the officer says, okay, well, I got to take you to jail. Well, it's, 6 p.m. and I got my family and my kids here, and, we're just trying to get from here A to B to go visit family, and it's like, no problem. It's $400. You don't have to go see the judge. So he would go through all the procedures and go to, at that time, money orders, which Russians probably don't know what a money order is.
I don't think so.
But you could go to a convenience store, a little, your local Petrochka, and buy a money order for $400. When you are the violator is supposed to fill in the court's name, the trooper would say, leave it blank. I'll take care of it for you. Give them a receipt, do everything, boom, there you go. So then that trooper would then write his own name, take it to his bank, cash it, take the money. Okay, so this went on for several months. So they called up this particular trooper's supervisor or sergeant and says, hey, you got a problem. Why haven't you caught this? Why haven't you noticed this? I was like, what do you mean? So then they go back through his timesheets, his arrest reports, and now they can see a trend that they hadn't seen before, that there was a large volume of Mexican vehicles, more than the average, that this trooper was stopping.
So
Make a long story short, he got
greedy.
arrested. He got greedy.
Yeah.
He got greedy, but he got caught. And he only got caught because another bad guy wanted to make a deal. Eventually, he probably would have gotten caught because of checks and balances with your supervisor. You would see a trend, but apparently this was too soon of a trend to happen, but it does happen. So he got prosecuted, he lost his job, he will never work as a police officer again, and he's charged with a felony. Happens.
But would you say that maybe similar situations, not necessarily with the same strategy, do you think, or do you know, or do you presume that it happens quite a bit in the U.S., or is it like a minority of police officers that engage in this activity? Or perhaps maybe you don't know because...
So my law enforcement career starts in early 90s, 1992. I left in 2019. So in that span of 27 years, and of course 27 years with one particular agency, I have more experience to about 30 years. But within that span, within that agency, the level of professionalism within the law enforcement profession has been raised. So it was raised through mandatory training. It was raised through mandatory vetting. They instituted like polygraph. There was more intensive vetting of prospective candidates. They raised the minimum education levels. So You brought a more professional, more well-rounded individual in than in the very beginning, like they did before. So that helped. So you raised the standards, and some of that corruption fell off as well. But not all, because some agencies, the thing about it is, you can't hire a college graduate and pay them dirt, because the job market is just so competitive. They're going to go to somewhere where they pay more. So pay in the police profession has had to keep up, if not be higher than the prevailing average of college graduates within a particular area. This is quite difficult for a city like Austin, Texas, when you've got, basically it's the Silicon Valley of Texas. You've got Dell, Apple, all of these, Samsung, all of these tech companies there that pay way more. So has to be competitive. So police salaries have gone up quite a bit as compared to what they were 20, 30 years ago. And that's helped, but they still lag behind in many areas. So,
which means they'd have to recruit from poorer areas, which means the potential values of the people that they're hiring
correct.
are subpar or substandard. And at the same time, I've seen in many of the videos that are available, I've seen a lot more tattooed officers that almost make it look like it's a gang member, but in a blue uniform. Has that been caused by the decrease in values or?
Yes and no. So this is a pet peeve of mine because I do not like tattoos. For me, if you have tattoos, you wear tattoos, you do you, that's totally up to you. In my particular agency, we had uniform standards that you could not have any visible tattoos. So as long as your tattoos were maybe sleeved, and you would have to wear a long sleeve. So if it's 104 degrees or plus 40 in the summer, then you're out there in a long sleeve and a tie because you chose to have tattoos. Now that's Texas Department of Public Safety. But other agencies actually allow their officers to show their tattoos. I think it's absolutely abhorrent. I hate it because I grew up in a time, to me, with the only people who had tattoos were those who had been in prison or those that were up to no good. Well, that's my generation. So I have a very negative opinion about tattoos. Not saying that you're bad because you have a tattoo. I'm just saying the perception of it. But when I look at a law enforcement officer, I don't want to see a tattoo because of my perception. But the accepted values in America has gone down considerably. I remember this starting to happen in the mid-90s. My local supermarket in a small, I lived in a small town, 10,000 people. So we had one big chain supermarket. It was family-owned supermarket. It's in Texas, HEB, still family-owned, huge corporation. And I remember I saw one of their employees, one of their cashiers, had an earring, male. And I was like, what? And I remember walking up to the manager because I knew him, and I was like, "Hey, what's with the earring?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, new policy. They're allowing them now to wear earrings because, there's too many guys out there wearing earrings, and we need employees."
This is
like, really?
How long ago?
Oh, probably mid-90s.
Mid-90s. And now, because there's such a thing as a slippery slope fallacy, but technically speaking, if you look back at the 90s and you look back now, it's not a fallacy. The slippery slope is like the truth. It went from a little bit of an earring to what's happening now and what's allowed, unfortunately.
It's because if you give an inch, they'll take a foot, so to speak. So it's an earring today. Tomorrow it's a nose ring. Tomorrow it's whole painted face, blue hair, or something that's not socially acceptable, as we would say, right? So that's why you can walk into a Starbucks or any national chain and you can find people with purple hair, nose rings, face tattoos, arm sleeves. Everything goes. Why? Because somebody complained. And then, of course, you have like the ACLU, which is the American Civil Liberties Union, which totally foreign to Russian, or the Southern Poverty Institute, which has absolutely nothing to do with poverty. They just like to put that in the name to make it sound like it's virtuous, but it's not. And so you have these lawyers from these, like the ACLU and Southern Poverty, that will take on these cases and sue the shit out of these sometimes mom and pop stores, to make them comply and subservient and say, you need to hire this guy because they show up to work on time, they do their work, they have no demerits, they do what they're supposed to do, but you are violating their right because they want to wear a nose ring. And you're saying, I just don't want my customers to be greeted by somebody with a nose ring.
But it's interesting because it's technically a private business, and in the States, at least from what it used to be that it's your private business. You can hire and fire whoever you want, and you have your set standards. You have a uniform that you want your employees to wear. They have to wear it. They have to show up to work with it. But now you can look like a total clown, and I assume that employers can't do anything about it.
Well, here's the thing, is that you're absolutely right. So Texas is what is it called? Employment at will, which means if you're hired to work by someone and the boss just feels like he woke up on a bad day and wants to fire you, you're gone. But in certain situations, if, say, your business accepts public money, either in the way of grants or in the way of loans from the federal government, or now there is a tie to federal employment laws.
So now you have to have a black guy, a purple guy, a tranny, a couple of women on the department that shouldn't be there because they can't lift.
Now you need to embrace diversity.
Yeah, exactly. DEI.
Simply because you took public funds.
That's a
U.S. of freedom, right?
That's a whole interesting other fish to talk about, another fish to fry. But I have a question because we really went off the topic, and the topic was policing. I have a question here. This is something that I think I support, but I want to know if you can convince me that I should or shouldn't support it, perhaps. Stop and frisk. I don't think many Russians know what that is. I think that it's been effective when it's been deployed in New York, where if you see someone acting suspicious, you can go ahead and give them a pat down, or if someone looking suspicious. We have something similar to this in Moscow, but mainly it's reserved for migrants. So they'll stop, they'll check documents, they'll make sure that this person is not doing anything illegal. But what about your opinion? How has stop and frisk, has it been effective in the U.S. in your opinion, or is it something that violates people's rights?
Yes.
To what?
To both.
Okay.
So one, yes, it is effective. The reason for stop and frisk was for officer safety. The end result of abuse of that is violation of a person's rights. So that's the other end of the pendulum when it swings. So stop and frisk has, there's a very narrow corridor of a situation where the officer can actually pat you down. So first of all, the contact that I'm having with you has to be of an investigative nature. I just can't see you walking down the street and say, hey, you, excuse me, let me pat you down. No. There has to be some articulable fact that would make you seem suspicious to me.
But that could be anything. I could be wearing a hoodie and having back pain walking and perhaps maybe being a bit weird, and I could be patted down.
It's all going to be up to the officer, but I have to be able to articulate those facts on paper, on a report that would convince a judge that I had the right to do that to you.
But then the person would have to sue you if they feel like their rights are violated. So they have to go through the whole procedure of finding a lawyer, which in some cases, I assume that once the pat down is done, you're like, I'm just glad that it's over with and I'm going to go on my merry way.
That's why it can be abused. That's why it can be abused, absolutely. The stop and frisk came from a Supreme Court decision, Terry versus, oh man, you're really pushing me to remember stuff.
Yeah, Terry stops, right?
Terry stop, but it's Terry versus Ohio, I think.
I'm pretty sure it's Terry versus Ohio, yeah.
I think it's Terry versus Ohio. Anyway, and it's a Fourth Amendment case, which has to do with search and seizure. Fourth Amendment, so if you're an American, you need to know your rights, and these are the 3 rights that you need to study, especially when dealing with law enforcement. And that is the Fourth Amendment, that's arrest, search, and seizure. The First Amendment, which is the, what we call it, right of free speech, but there's more than that. And the Fifth Amendment, which is your right to remain silent and not incriminate yourself. Those are the most important rights that any individual has during an encounter with police. So the Fourth Amendment, like I said, was meant, or rather that Terry frisk ruling was meant to protect the officer, but it can be abused. Because let's say I pat you down, and here's how it can be abused, okay? We're doing a stop, and I'm talking to you. I have a reason, say it's 2 a.m., we're in an area where there's been a lot of burglaries. You're wearing, you just look out of place, and I stop you, and you have no really kind of good reason to be in this area, and you kind of look like maybe you're hiding something, and say, sir, I'm going to pat you down for my safety. And at that time that I go to pat you down, boom, you block me now. Now, that's an assault, or at least I can articulate it like an assault. Now I'm going to go hands on you. And this thing just escalated. Now you're going to jail. When if you didn't have anything on you, if you just would have relaxed, I would have patted you down, you got no weapons, maybe or nothing, I would have let you go. But just the mere fact that you don't realize that I had the right to do that, and you fought back, now you've escalated it, and now you're going to jail. That's an abuse. Do you see how that could be? That could be an abuse, depending on how that officer takes it. That happens all the time.
So it's effective, but it's an abuse of people's rights. Now, regarding, and it's interesting that you should mention this, just today, I just happened to stumble upon a particular channel, and I was watching, and it was a police encounter in the States. And it reminded me of this one particular aspect of American policing that I haven't seen in Russia, is that things can go from 0 to 100 incredibly quickly. So in this video, they basically, it's a girlfriend of some guy. She ends up in next to the guy's house, and the mom comes out and she's like, listen, we just want her to go. We don't want her to get in trouble, but we want her to leave. And she's kind of not being responsive with the police officer. They convince her to leave. So the police officer is very calm. His deputy is very calm. Everything is fine. Then she peels out in her car. It was a green Charger Daytona. She peels out in the car, and she flies through a stop sign, right? Because she's very emotional. Now, what happens next is the 0 to 100. Not only do all three officers stop her, they have their weapons drawn and they're going up to the vehicle. They take her out of the car, slam her to the ground, and put her in handcuffs over a stop sign and peeling out.
I don't want her here. She's been asked to leave many, many times. She doesn't want to leave. I don't want her hurt. I don't want her arrested. I just want her out of here, please, and I want it noted. I want to report.
All right, like I said, if she comes back on your property, you call us. She's going to give us another reason to take her.
Show Samantha 2780 West property.
You're welcome. She just blew through that stop sign.
Go get her.
We're 50 and a 50 in the slow lane. We're slowing down. We're coming up to West Virginia Street.
Turn the car off. Turn it off. Turn the car off. Turn it off. Turn the car off. Get out of the car. Turn the mother car off.
What the f*** did I do? What did I do?
Unlock the door.
Get on the car.
What did I do?
Get on the car.
Oh my God, what did I
on the ground.
Wait, what did I do?
Give me your hand.
What did I do? What did I do? What did I do?
Don't move.
What did I do? What did I do?
Why does it go from 0 to 100 in so many police videos in the U.S.? So quickly.
It happens. And unfortunately, this is due to many, many factors. I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a sociologist, so I can't tell you the reasons. But the thing is that it's just human nature. Adrenaline gets kicked in, and adrenaline takes over, and their actual thought process goes out the window. So something can escalate so quickly when, here's the deal. So she peels out, goes through a stop sign. Well, she's endangering the public, and she's a danger to herself, and she's violated a traffic law. All right? So I go after her. Does she flee? Is it a pursuit?
No, it's not. No, from the video, it's not a pursuit. She stops.
She stops. Okay? And now I'm going to come up to her and say, what is going on? Just go home. All right? Now we're going to have to deal with this. All right? Pull her out. Yeah, it could be a custody arrest at that time. Or if you can get her to calm down, maybe have somebody come and pick her up and go. You know, it depends on the situation. But yeah, she could still go to jail, but there's no reason to swarm the car, open it up, drag her out of the vehicle, because, I mean, has she resisted? Did you give her a command to get out of the vehicle? Did she try to get out of the vehicle? Did she try to flee? You see what I mean? So yeah, I have seen a lot of these guys, and some females do it too, but predominantly it's guys, get an adrenaline rush, and it just takes over, and they go overboard. And those are the ones who wind up usually getting sued, and those are the ones in the videos you see on YouTube.
And obviously, to be fair, there's a lot of encounters that don't end up on YouTube because they're nothing special in a negative way. It's that when I've seen a lot of these videos of Russian police and the kinds of abuse they endure from some crazy people of the Russian public, and it's like either they're uninterested or they've been trained to be as patient and as stoic as possible. But here's the question for you, my next one. Now that you've been in Russia for an extended period of time, you've noticed that during police stops, there are people just chilling, talking to police officers next to their vehicles. Why is it that it's best in the States when a police officer stops you to roll all four windows down, if you have four windows to roll down, to have your hands on the steering wheel, and preferably to turn off the car?
My answer to that is because you do not know the mental state or the emotional state of the officer that just pulled you over. That's why. That's why I would caution you to do that if you were in the States. Not because you're trying to be safe or comply with the law, because nowhere in the law does it say that if I pull you over as a police officer, that you must roll your window down, turn the vehicle off, put your hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, and if it's at night, turn on the interior light to your car. Nowhere in the law does it say that.
But it makes you a lot more safe if you do so.
Why?
It's advised.
Why does it make it safe? Because of many, many encounters with police who have flipped out because an emotional state that they're in, the lack of training, or their state of mind on that particular day. We've seen officers go totally overboard. I mean, I binge watch sometimes these videos because I just like, oh my gosh, what is wrong with you? So I've seen that happen. That's why I've told my son, that's why I've told my daughter, if you get pulled over by police, do this. Pull over, turn your car off, roll the window down, put your hand on the steering wheel, not because you have to, but because you don't know what kind of a nut job is walking up to your car. You don't know if he's a reasonable or she a reasonable police officer in a good frame of mind to handle this contact, or did they just leave something, or do they have a rough time with the wife in the morning, or you never know. Always be safe. That is a problem. That is a problem because you're hiring people that don't have the mental capacity or the mental stability, the emotional stability to handle the job. And that's why, that's what's unsaid. When you have to teach people, roll your window down, turn a light on, turn your vehicle off, put your hand on 10 and 2, what's not being said is the reason you're doing that is because you cannot trust and depend on the officer who's approaching your car has the mental capacity and the mental stability to handle this reasonably.
Now, before we move on to the stories, I have a question for you, and I'm going to circle back and summarize everything. And I know a lot of these things because I lived in the States, and I always am trying to ensure that I'm up to date as much as possible with what's going on. So, and I don't mean any offense at all when I say this, but if, for example, you have, I'm still afraid of police. Even in Russia now, I see the police in my mirror, and I have something going off in my brain from my experience in the US. And I'm not a person that's generally scared of things, but I see a cop and I automatically don't like it. And I've had 0 bad encounters here. I've had them in the States. So my question is, with civil forfeiture, with the Patriot Act, with being pulled over 10 and 2, windows down, with everything that has to do with crime enforcement and the militarization of police in the States, why is Russia the police state?
It's convenient narrative. It's convenient narrative, and of course it's projection. You always project. Well, the West is very good at PR, very good at propaganda, and they project on others what is happening at home so that you don't pay attention to that. I have nothing but respect for the professional police force and the encounters that I've had here in Russia. They've been nothing but courteous, professional, calm, rational. That's been my experience. I've not had any type of contact that's been of an investigative nature, like, we need to talk to you because we think you've committed a crime. Nothing like that. They've all been rather benign or administrative. But I don't know. I've been around cops, law enforcement, for so long that I just feel at home when I'm around them. I mean, I don't feel intimidated. I don't feel nervous. Not in the States, not here. Certainly in the States, if I saw bad behavior, I'd call it out, simply because I have that confidence and that I have that confidence that, hey, I've done what you did, or I've done what you're doing. You know, don't bullshit me, and I'll call them out on it. Of course, I have that
29 years
that
of
ability
police
to do it.
experience.
Yeah, and I'll call it out. But here, I haven't had an opportunity to do it, nor would I, because I'm a guest in this country. Have to remember that. But yeah, when I've gone to other countries and I've run into police officers, I've gone up and talked to them, start shaking hands. I was like, oh, I'm from America. I've done this. Oh, really? And start up a conversation. And the thing about it is that you realize that police, and I don't care where they are in the world, the ones that I've talked to, you know, a drunk, belligerent asshole is a drunk, belligerent asshole. I don't care what language they speak or where they're from. A crying mother, a lost child, death of any horrific sense still affects the person, no matter what uniform you're wearing, no matter where you are. We're all human. So there's kind of this little camaraderie that we have, you know, and you can kind of walk away saying like, yeah, I haven't seen what you've seen, you haven't seen what I've seen, but we've seen a lot of the same crazy shit. And we share that. And you can kind of just walk away knowing that. But yeah, we're all the same. I would love to have an in-depth conversation with law enforcement here, just to learn a little bit more. I had an interesting taxi ride one day, and it was too short. It was about 40 minutes long, but he was a police officer for 15 years in Russia. And we were just going back and forth. He's telling me about the force and how it was, their training, what their everyday life was like. And I found it so fascinating. You know, I wish I could spend more time with them in just a relaxed atmosphere, because I'm sure there's a lot of similarities and a lot of differences.
Oh, for sure.
And I'd like to just contrast and compare.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because I used to be a guest in your country. Now you're a guest in mine. But it's definitely circumstantial. It's definitely not everyone gets these kinds of crazy moments. But I had a police officer pull a weapon on me in the States for taking a turn too quickly. That was his opinion. And then I got schooled, according to him, by how I should learn how to drive properly. I didn't get a ticket, nothing. But I did have a pistol in my face. Now, I know you haven't had an encounter like that here. I'm glad. But then it also goes back to the point. I mean, we're the police state, apparently. And the U.S. is not. And that just boggles my mind. And I hope that, first of all, I hope that everyone, everywhere, feels safe around police officers. But I never felt safe around American police officers. Canadian, yeah. Somewhat. But they've done some crazy stuff as well.
Something that I'll never forget is my father would always tell me as a child growing up that police officer is your friend. If you have any trouble or something's happening and you're in danger, you can run to a police officer and they will protect you. So that was my upbringing. So I had that frame of mind when I considered going into law enforcement already. And when people came and told me, hey, this is happening, or I got a call for service, or had to do something, in my frame of mind, I was like, today's your lucky day, because you came to me, and I'm going to help you. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to find out what's going on and try to make this better. But that's me, and there's a whole lot of others like me, but there's some that aren't. And it's the ones who aren't like me that wind up on YouTube and unfortunately in a negative light. But there's a whole lot more professional law enforcement officers in the states than there are the bad ones. But the bad ones make it look bad for everybody.